When you have young, white, male Antifa punks screaming the N-word in the faces of black police officers, and the entire left thinks this is appropriate and not racist, you see exactly what the end game is here. I'm Dr. Duke with The New American, and joined again by our friend and international correspondent, Alex Newman. Alex, thanks for being with us again today.
Thanks for having me, Duke.
So the couple days after the 4th of July, everybody have a great Independence Day. We remind me, Alex, to stop using the word 4th of July. That's just a calendar number. This is Independence Day in the United States. Happy Independence Day to everybody. And I would also like to point out that on July 6th, the newest iteration of the New American magazine will be released. It's all about the riots and the police officers and what's really going on. You wrote a wonderful cover story for this that we talked about in another segment. I'd like to talk with you about my story in the New American magazine for July 6, 2020, which is all about supporting the local police. And my premise is that we must support the police, and by supporting them, that means calling them out when they're doing things they shouldn't. And that includes kneeling for too long on the neck of a suspect, obviously. But it also means calling out police officers, local police officers, and even National Guardsmen who've been summoned up, who have walked off their post to kneel before protesters, to, in the case of one sheriff in Massachusetts, to prostrate himself on his belly in front of protesters and rioters, and to otherwise show support for the cause of the rioters. This, to me, is a very dangerous precedent. One of the things we understand, Alex, from one of the things that separates communism from fascism, ironically, is that, generally speaking, in communist countries, the government swallows up local business. It swallows up local policing. In fascism, on the other hand, rather than simply taking away from business owners their businesses and appropriating to the state, in fascism very often, the corporate entities work with the new government. They side with the revolutionaries in the streets. And so what's happening here when these police officers have a job to do? When they're standing at the front lines, they cannot, for any reason, be demonstrating political bias. The analogy I use, say it's 2002. It's six months from the bombing of the Trade Center. And all of a sudden, there's a huge anti-Islamic movement in this country that starts protesting very vociferously outside mosques and throwing rocks through windows and burning mosques down. Can you imagine the outrage if local police showed up to defend those buildings and then walked off the job to side with these Christian or secular advocates of getting rid of Islam? We would never hear the end of that. It would be a betrayal. Those cops would be fired. But to walk off the job in support of something like Black Lives Matter, do it on your own time. Do not use time that you are supposed to defend and protect and promote and serve to side with anybody.
Yeah, it was so disgraceful to see those, Duke. It makes you want to cry. I mean, every one of those cops and those National Guardsmen who kneeled in the face of rioters and protesters, they should be at least fired. If it was somebody in the military, they ought to be court-martialed. Completely unacceptable. I mean, so far beyond unacceptable that it's hard to believe we're even having this conversation. But I do have a certain amount of sympathy for them, because what's happening here is the same thing that's happening to the American people. They are facing a barrage of psychological warfare. They are being told from all directions that they're racist, that everybody hates them, that they're brutal, that they're barbarians, that they're upholding an evil system, when quite the opposite is true. If you look at America's history, and I have some concerns about the way policing is done in this country, and when I was, in my late teens, I was not a big fan of cops. I wanted to go do silly things, and so cops were not my friend. But, cops must stand up for the rule of law. They must not bow down to people whose stated intention is to dismantle our civilization, dismantle our families, dismantle our system of private property, crush our individual rights. I mean, to bow down to that is a total betrayal of everything you're supposed to stand for. When we hire you, we force you to put your hand on a Bible and take an oath to the U.S. Constitution. If you're going to bow down before people who want to tear down our Constitution, you're in the wrong job. You should find another way to make a living. And, with that, I'll say we do need to support our local police. There is, part of this orchestrated effort to tear down America requires the dismantling of our sheriff's departments, of our local police departments, because you can never implement a police state in this country as long as we have a system of local law enforcement and our sheriffs are accountable to the local community and the police chief is accountable to the local community. We saw it during the Obama administration. Obama started making noises about gun control, and all over this country, in some states, every single sheriff in the state said, you come in here and try to take some guns from my citizens, from my constituents, your people will end up in county jail faster than you can say gun control. And that's exactly what they're worried about. That's exactly why they are demonizing our local police. So they're telling liberals, oh, your cops are all racist yahoos and they just want to kill black people. And that's an absolute lie from the pit of hell. All you have to do is look at the data and see that that's not true. In fact, police are more likely to shoot a white person. So it's a false narrative. And then they're telling conservatives, oh, look, your police can't protect you. The rioters are burning down your cities and they're breaking up your businesses and there's nothing those little cops can do to keep you safe. And that's a lie. They're being hamstrung. They're being handcuffed by Democrat mayors and Democrat governors so that they can't do their job and protect our rights and protect our property and protect our lives. So on both sides, we need to call out these lies. We got to stand with our local police and we have to preserve our system because that is what secures our individual rights.
Yeah, that is a key hallmark of my article, which points out something that I know you were going down this road. They're getting rid of the police not to get rid of police. Every Stasi state, every communist takeover requires a very orchestrated police, militarized police force. They are getting rid of local police, making them ineffective, making them psychologically warfare. The great word you use. So this is psychological warfare against local police. Because what's going to happen, we're already seeing it in CHOP, right? Lawlessness, the lawlessness that has set in the wake of Defund, or New York City, where cops, or Atlanta, where cops have walked off the job. What have we seen? We've seen huge spikes in violence. And the reason this is being done is to humiliate local cops, to start defunding them. Then everybody wakes up and realizes, even the looters, even the Democrat politicians, that their houses now aren't safe. And so the call is not to reform this clunky system of local police, but what if we had a federalized police department, right? That's the big thing. And so the other aspect of my article that I'd like to just run past you is psychological warfare. Nobody in the country, nobody in the world's talking about this. Outside of the New American Magazine, we are the only outlet saying this. You and I are among the only people arguing this, that why did we assemble all of those police officers at all of these riots only to tell them to stand down? We forced those police officers to endure a kind of medieval ritual of collective atonement, to stand there and be screamed at, hollered at, yelled at, bricks and rocks thrown at them, to have to stand there and watch as buildings are looted, their own precincts are being looted, forced to flee like little children, to arm them from head to toe in riot gear with guns and batons and pepper spray and tasers, only to not be allowed to use them to defend even their immediate health and safety. That medieval shaming is part and parcel of what we're talking about here. The only reason they were sent there was to collectively be exposed to the frauds that the left says they are. And when you assemble that kind of force and then not let them act, not let them do policing, there's no reason for having them. If the Democrat mayors were honest, they would have said, hey, what they basically said is, let our cities burn. We deserve this. Black Lives Matter is correct. Antifa's right. But they brought the cops in to humiliate the cops. So I get and I feel sorry for them too. I get the psychological warfare. I get it. When you have young, white, male Antifa punks screaming the N-word in the faces of black police officers, and the entire left thinks this is appropriate and not racist, you see exactly what the end game is here. So what I'd like to do is get your thoughts at the end of this about the psychological warfare, and why is nobody able to comprehend or willing to even talk about what's happening with this demolishing of our local force?
Yeah, I think one of the big things, Duke, is that people are scared. We see people are losing their jobs for speaking out, but we have got to stand up. And frankly, these Democrat mayors and these Democrat governors who ordered the police to stand down, who ordered the National Guard to stand back and accept this abuse and accept the riots and accept their police precincts being burned, I think we need some real law enforcement investigations here. And if it can be determined that these people were conspiring with others, whether abroad or domestic terrorists here in the United States, to undermine our freedom, to deprive people of their rights, to deliberately allow our property rights to be trampled upon, if it can be determined that they willfully engaged in this conduct, I think they need to be removed from office and potentially even prosecuted. Go talk to the business owners who invested their life savings in a business. You know, that black man in Minneapolis who was crying. He invested his life savings in his little bar and then had it destroyed by terrorists and thugs because the mayor and because the governor ordered the police and the National Guard not to do anything. That's criminal. It's completely unacceptable. These people need to be held accountable, and if they aren't, it's not going to stop.
And for 4 years, Democrats have screamed about foreign countries intervening in our elections, our cultural civilization, and it seems to only bother them when it's Putin and when it's Trump. All of this international messing around with what our country is doesn't seem to bother our progressives.